Top 5 reasons Curtis Zohara is my sworn enemy. Number 5. Oh, never mind. Oh. You think that's gonna work? Huh? You think that's gonna work? Well, it did. Last year he sent me a sealed box of that set. Knowing what I main deck in Yu-Gi-Oh, which is Neo Daedalus, and there's a lot of cards in that set that support Neo Daedalus. So, that was very thoughtful of him. Last week I brought up how much, like, an unexpected gift can go a long way. And he was doing that, over a year ago with that. He was super kind. The fun part is, like, he lives in Canada. He actually was, like, the big friend that I would ask about Tim Hortons before trying it recently. But he was, the one thing about secret gifts across countries is, you gotta ask, like, a P.O. box / address. So, you might be expecting something, but I didn't know what it was. And it's really cool of him to do that. And once again, it's amazing the memories we keep intact with things like that. So once again, dude, also just thanks for being around. I've known him for around 2 years now. Through LinkedIn, he started watching my Yu-Gi-Oh broadcasts, and he's been an amazing friend and moderator at this point. So thank you once again. Speaking of cross country, a while back I talked about how living in Missouri is like having some superpower. Living in the Midwestern United States, there really is a superpower of long distance car travel. We're just so used to it, to the point that when I go to big Pokemon tournaments, the common courtesy is when you set up, you ask where you're from. And those people from East and West Coast, like big cities, whether they're living in New York or California, and a lot of other the East West Coast cities and states, when I would say Kansas City, they're like, did you drive? And a lot of these tournaments were in Indianapolis, Indiana, and I say, it's only about 7.5 hours, right? And they're like, 7.5 hours? Yeah. Like, I remember conversations about them basically saying that 2 hours and above is their flying threshold. And I'm like, whoa, 2 hours? I was like, St. Louis is only like a mini trip to us, and that's around 4. And what's interesting is I remember, and I've brought up some things I've learned in community college, and one of those things was Professor Conley from my Intro to Philosophy class. There's a lot of things I learned from there. The principle of charity is one. The whole, like, actually, principle of charity was in my my college logic class, but he was the overseer of the philosophy department. But he did tell me, he taught about things like Pascal's wager and just some other great general philosophy stuff about, reflective things, the whole, like, he did talk about that whole, if you find a watch in the middle of the forest, who made this kind of thought process that you could go through. And, one thing that he did super well wasn't even part of, it wasn't in like a textbook lesson, but it's something he brought up. And I think this is a key factor from taking a good teacher and becoming a great one. Good teachers know how to teach with the curriculum. I think great teachers bring in a lot of, like, relatable things. They know how to tie in a general related thing, or they bring in their own personal relations to things. But it's in a nice, suitable format to teach an abundance of different class students where, that come from different walks of the earth. And so I remember one example he made while teaching is he talked about, we were kind of talking a bit about human memory and concentration, and he brought up, do I remember how I drove here? How did I drive here? That kind of philosophy, it wasn't even a philosophy, but it's just this phenomenon where you realize that literally, like, he got, with a community college, basically all of us are commuters. Even if you lived across the street in the apartments, you're technically, walking to school. Maybe you drive, but 99.9% of the community college students there were commuters. So when he brought up, like, when you're done with a car trip and you're like, oh my gosh, he basically was bringing out the term of zoning out almost. He's like, how did I not hit anyone? And that's such an interesting sensation, is that it was relatable to the class in general, because it got me to think about how, it's about a 20-minute drive to my community college here and back. And that's every day that I went to school. And, I like every semester was doing Monday to Friday. And the whole factor of not only thinking about I'm driving 20 minutes to and from on the interstate going 70 miles per hour, 60 to 70 depending on different roads, but in this case, around like 65, and on smaller roads obviously a little bit less, but still, you're going around 60, 65 for a lot of your driving there. And the thought process of when I'm on the interstate, if someone just suddenly stopped or didn't concentrate, I mean, a few lives could be lost right there. And, one life is already enough to do a lot of damage to other people around them. And, it's someone passing away. My mom brought up when I was a kid that we're basically driving weapons. And I think we're so used to how we're accustomed with nice music and we can give our cars cool paint jobs that we sometimes forget that, yeah, these vehicles are going 60 to 65 to 70 miles per hour on the interstate. So if we do a lot of travel on that interstate and something goes wrong, it could get bad pretty fast. So when the teacher brought up about this kind of zen-like state of us driving, it's like, oh my gosh. And then if you start overthinking while you drive, that could be its own distraction. And obviously, big PSA, never text and drive. And that's a serious thing. To this day, I'll see people on the road that get on their phones. And it doesn't matter if it's on the traffic light or on the interstate. Getting on your phone is one of the biggest causes of car wrecks right now in the United States. For a while, the state of Missouri had a punishment of people texting on their phone. And honestly, I wish they would dial that up again. Unfortunately, you need some type of law like this to really reestablish how serious it is. In that case, you take the phones away and cars can still be distracting. That's why they say eyes on the road. And so this kind of zen-like state when you drive, it's ironically, it is a form of concentration. Your eyes are on the road. You might be thinking about things, especially if you have a philosophy exam that day, trying to get ready with the terminology. But if you get too distracted, yeah, that could be one wrong turn in a ditch. Could be one wrong turn for an entire car wreck. So it really is. It's a lot like in the past where I talked about playing music and playing fighting games. There is a zen-like state where you don't overthink, so you make sure that you don't over-panic. But obviously, if you're not concentrating, you could be missing out on some type of routine that you've been practicing. There comes a form of muscle memory, for sure, when you're driving. But it's good to be attentive. So I just think about that almost class-filled shock when he brought up, like, do I remember my drive here today? And it's like, oh my gosh, yeah. In terms of core memory, you probably won't remember everything on the drive, but it's like, okay, well, I'm here, I'm safe. Yeah. But, things like seat belts, keeping your eyes on the road, obviously not getting just too distracted with like your music or even a conversation in the car. Definitely, it's important. It's important to keep tabs on that. But I love how that stretched into philosophy because, life itself, we just the way human memory is, we can't store everything in a long-term memory, and all of our brains work pretty differently. But the general consensus is those experiences we have, they do stick with us. They get stored in the long-term memory. And so it's important that each day, while you might not remember every single key you press on your keyboard that day, the message you send in the end can lay a big impact. And that message could just be a simple hello to your friends and family, which could leave its own long distance effect for how they might treat others in that day, in that week, in that month. There really is a butterfly effect to what we do each day. Stay attentive, stay alert, relax, and keep at it each day. I think that's really important, and I think it's good for us to reflect upon how we keep getting out of bed each day and doing our best to just try to make the world a better and safer place. And you know, that movie Meet the Robinsons always talks about keep moving forward. What a good, simple, and powerful message. Keep moving forward, enjoy every day. And for this day, yeah, I love Mondays.